accept us as the guests of Ahlul Bayt's guests, especially guests of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as those who are in service of the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allow us all to be on the path of the Imam. Continuing our conversation, reflecting and discussing the teachings of Naraqi, Allama Naraqi, in his book Jami al-Sa'adat, or the collector or collection of the Felicities, which is a book on Islamic ethics or akhlaq and tazkiyah, purification. Very, very important subject, in fact. And we will speak a little more about the importance of the subject actually towards the end of our session today. Although we discussed it in the beginning, in the very first session last week was our first session. This session and perhaps last session are very introductory. So a lot of the concepts or even terminologies that are used are introduced in these sessions, and therefore it's important to pay attention to those building blocks as we move forward, inshallah. The last session, for those who were with us, the end of last session was the very important point that he brought up, which was the fact that dunya and akhirah are in opposition, or what he refers to as mutabaddan. They're opposites. And again, I spoke briefly about it, and we speak often about this. However, I wanted to shed a little bit more light on this, especially because sometimes people may be confused. Why did God create dunya in the first place if it's the opposite of akhirah? And the ahadith about the significance of this dunya being the place where we plan for akhirah. So what is meant by dunya and akhirah, this world and the hereafter being opposites? This could be a question for some of you. Maybe some of you have somehow resolved this in the past and have figured the answer to this dilemma, perhaps. Before I go further in it, since we hope to have our discussions more of a dialogue rather than a monologue, does anyone want to, or would anyone like to share some point or their perspective on this very dilemma? The fact that we're speaking of dunya and akhirah, this world and the hereafter, being in basically two opposites, referred to as mutabaddan, contradicting each other, or opposites of each other, and whatever gets us closer to one drives us further from the other, and whatever gets and vice versa, whatever gets us further from one brings us closer to the other. So if we're somehow getting closer to this dunya, more attached to this dunya, we're detaching from akhirah, and if we're detaching from this dunya, we're attaching ourselves to akhirah. Anyone wants to shed some light here, perhaps, or share their perspective?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Assalam wa rahmatullah.
So maybe we can look at this as the garden patch. This is the one where we sow and we reap temporarily, but the permanent reaping is for the hereafter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get yourself too busy in just temporary reaping, then you lose out on the permanent reaping, which is everlasting. So it's a ground for opportunity.
Ahsant. Anyone else?
Just gonna mention, I think the hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he says in Nahjul Balagha, I believe, that you work for this world as if you were to live forever, and work for the hereafter as if you were to die tomorrow. So on the one hand, I think it is emphasizing that we should not completely abandon this world, because, if we do live in it in a meaningful way, it can also help us, make a good impact, and not necessarily, from the perspective of getting attached to the world, but maybe you can elaborate on that. But then, of course, balancing that with, if you know that you don't have too much time in this world, then you're not going to waste that time, and you'll be more focused in preparing for the hereafter as well.
Yes, Ahsant. Anyone else would like to share some thoughts?
Maybe you can shed a bit of light then on this idea about time is limited. How do you know how much to use to facilitate dunya versus akhirah? Because time is limited, and there's a lot to do for both worlds, so to say,
Ahsant. Yes. So this is actually very good. What was shared was very good, and it helps us get a little more focused on what we are trying to understand, and what the ulama al-akhlaq, the author and teachers of ethics, are trying to share, or the, the the perspective they're trying to get us to understand. The hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, "A'mal li dunyaka ka'annaka ta'ishu abada," work for this dunya or for your dunya as if you're going to live forever, and work for akhirah as if you're going to die tomorrow. Number one, it actually gives us the priority, to set the priority right. And I often tell mu'minina mu'minat, it's not about the fact that this life being forever, therefore it has a priority. No, when you have one exam is due, or one assignment is due tomorrow, and the other assignment you have time for it. It's not due yet, or there's you have almost an open end due date. Therefore, don't worry too much about that assignment. Worry about the one that's due tomorrow. So that's my understanding, and the understanding of ulama al-akhlaq regarding this. It's actually to alleviate the stress about dunya, so that we can focus on akhirah, because dunya is guaranteed. There's many ahadith that say, when it comes to this your livelihood in dunya, whatever you need, your needs, the sustenance that you need for dunya, it is guaranteed. What is not guaranteed is your place in akhirah, whether you're going to make it to a good place in akhirah, easy to Jannah, or a difficult path to Jannah, difficulties in barzakh, ease in barzakh, eventually, the status in Jannah, higher statuses or lower statuses. All of this is basically what we need to work for, because that is not guaranteed. However, what is guaranteed is our sustenance in dunya. So do we not work? No, we have to do our part, but don't stress over it. You do your part and don't stress. Now, in terms of dividing your time being one versus the other, we have the ahadith. It's not about dividing your time for dunya versus akhirah. No, dividing your time, tasks of dunya or tasks in dunya, which is all for akhirah. Please do focus with me a little bit, because it's a little. We're gonna get there, inshallah. We'll get the answer, but it's a little bit delicate. Everything that we do in dunya should be for akhirah. If we are travelers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we are seekers of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything in dunya should be for akhirah. So when we divide our time in dunya, for example, there's a hadith that says divide your time into 3. There's another one that says 4. Now again, there's it's not contradicting. It's just some of the aspects are combined. So one of them for your body and your physical health and your perhaps biological health and well-being, or physiological, including maybe even your mental health. That's the one period of time. It doesn't have to be equal periods. One period you give to that. Another period you give to the acquiring of your needs for your ma'ash, all the things that you need for your the work that you need to do to sustain your livelihood. And that's one period of time that you give it to that one. And then you give a period of time there is in one of the ahadith that divide the time for your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, specific. Now this is about specific acts of worship that it is again for us. It's not that God needs that time, or he needs us to do anything for him. It's rather for us, because we need that. We need spiritual well-being as well. And then we have the time for your ayal, for the children, for the family, wife and children. And even if you add, one of them mentions, for instance, seeking some of the legitimate or permissible desires of this dunya. So now we have multiple things that are mentioned in this riwayat that we should be doing, or one should be dividing their time to do. But all of these things can be done with the intention of qurbatan ila Allah, nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't have to be in the opposite direction. So we're not doing it if one wants to purify and get to a higher level of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can ensure that every task that they're doing, including sipping on water or any other task that they're doing, is to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for qurbatan ila Allah. And that is where it becomes for akhirah. It's not for dunya anymore. Even one having, basically seeking their needs for food and sustenance, making their food or eating and consuming their food. All of that could be done with the intention of qurbatan ila Allah, nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how, to gain strength, to be well, so that I'm capable of fulfilling my duty, including serving my family for the sake of God, including serving my community for the sake of God, doing all the good things that I want to do, again for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not necessarily in the opposite direction when we do it with the right intention. But if something is merely dunyawi, okay, loving children for the sake of God, perfect, beautiful, so that they are good children who would serve humanity and be good and get closer to the Almighty, and all of these beautiful concepts. However, loving children because of the physical, biological thing, without any aspect of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or loving them despite them being, God forbid, enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Loving ancestors, parents. Ibrahim ala nabina wa alayhi salam, he dissociated with his godfather, or the non-biological, rather the guardian father who raised him, his uncle. There was a connection. He told him, I will seek forgiveness for you, until he realized he's an enemy of God. فَلَمَّا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ أَنَّهُ عَدُوٌّ لِلَّهِ, when he realized, when it was clear to him that he is an enemy of God, تَبَرَّأَ مِنْهُ, he dissociated completely with him. So this is basically a little bit, although we could say a lot more, but a little bit about how they are opposites, in the sense that dunya for dunya is problematic. Dunya for akhirah is beautiful, and it's not in the opposite direction. So the dunya that is in the opposite direction is the one that is solely for here. Nothing to do with the connection with God, nothing to do with nearness to God, nothing to do with akhirah, simply about here. That dunya is the problem that Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, they often warned us about and told us to stay away from, and the one that would in fact deceive us. For example, وَخَدَعَتْنِ الدُّنْيَا بِغُرُورِهَا وَنَفْسِي بِخِيَانَتِهَا or بِجِنَايَتِهَا. So the dunya that deceives is dunya for dunya. Dunya that is distracting, dunya that is in the opposite direction, is when it is solely for here. It has nothing to do with the hereafter. And when we study further in this book of Akhlaq, or any, if we study Akhlaq or Islamic ethics, we will find that it is basically all of what we're trying to do is to develop good traits and good habits, so that our mind, our heart is connected to God, and therefore connected to things for akhirah, not for dunya. Focused on akhirah rather than focused on dunya. I hope that clarifies. Before I continue on, I wanted to make sure that somehow I was able to answer the question that I posed, or the dilemma that I shared.
أحسنت.
Sanallah ilaykum. So that is again one important reflection, that he ends it with one who does not work for their akhirah and focuses on this dunya, does not realize that they are in opposition, therefore puts their effort and their time, focuses their time and effort on this dunya and things to do with this dunya, in terms of accumulating wealth, simply for the sake of it, not because I need to. Let's say somebody is working hard to accumulate wealth so that they can build good structures for humanity, so that they can help people, so that they can help orphans, so that they can provide for the needy. All of these things that are godly, that are for akhirah, there's nothing wrong with it. But one who focuses on doing all, this jama, الذي جمع مالا وعدده, the one who basically accumulates wealth and counts it. Now I'm close to a million figure. Now I'm close to 10 million. Now I'm close to 100 million, and it never is enough. Or you look at these people when they're accumulating wealth, it's never enough. They're always trying to get more and more. It's just a number, literally, as Quran says, وَعَدَّدَ. And he thinks that يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَ. He thinks that he can be eternal through his wealth. The only memory remaining from Qarun is a curse, you know, وَأُتْبِعُوا فِي هَذِهِ لَعْنَةً. They're followed with a curse in this world. And obviously what will haunt them on the day of judgment. You know, the having to answer for all the wealth that they accumulated illegitimately, or they kept away from the rightful people, from giving it to the needy, to the poor, giving the right of the poor, which is a right in their wealth. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ. In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that for them, they know that in their wealth there is a right for the poor and the needy, and there are things that are due in their wealth, khums and zakat and so on. So one who does not do that will end up, or one who gets it in the wrong direction, does not realize the opposition of dunya and akhirah, will end up, he says, with this statement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zumar, Ya hasrata ala ma farrattu fi jambillah. He ends up in extreme regret, saying, you know, what a regretful state I'm in, because I have wasted my chance of being in the state of nearness, you know, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fi jambillah. The next, this concluded the first section, which we were discussing, which was titled that the action and the reward or punishment are the same. You know, basically the punishment is the action itself, or the reward is the action itself. So وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. They find whatever they did present, and that is in itself their reward. Or God forbid, if it was not of good nature, then it would be their what we refer to as punishment. The next section is regarding the effect. We had this discussion through a question. One of the mu'mineen had a question, and we had this discussion briefly through that question. However, there's a section in the book that basically discusses this, which is the effect of one's predisposition or nature on their ethics. So there is something that often is referred to in Arabic. It is called mizaj, or some may refer to it as tabi'a, nature. So predisposition or nature, and how does that affect one's ethics? So there are certain things in by nature, if you wish, we are born with certain qualities, certain conditions that we're born with by nature, and some of it has a direct impact on one's ethics. Some of it has a positive, some of it may not have so much of a positive impact on one's ethics. So the question that would be there, the question that would be one would ask, and I think last session, last week we had this, somebody raised this question. What if somebody has, for instance, due to certain hormonal imbalances in their brain, due to certain mental condition, due to certain perhaps psychological condition, has certain traits or certain limitations? How does that affect their journey of purification and their akhlaq? So there are opinions when it comes to this. However, ulama al-akhlaq, our teachers of ethics, they are of the belief that one is capable of making amends and changing. And it does take, obviously, a lot of training, a lot of exercise. And we're not speaking of the physical exercise here, obviously, but training and exercise and putting their naps in certain exercises or certain activities that may be uncomfortable or not so not part of their habits or part of their nature. In fact, they might have to fight against their nature and fight against their natural habits in order to do those things. However, eventually they should be able to change, to achieve some change. In fact, if they are unable to achieve change, therefore this science or this whole subject would not be relevant or valid. And a lot of the teachings of the Holy Quran and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt would not be valid either, which is definitely the wrong belief or the wrong notion to believe that the Prophet could not do, for instance, tazkiyah for the people, that he is not able to help purify anybody. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding his Prophet, he says that he was sent so that he can teach and purify. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ يعلمهم الكتاب ويزكيهم or يزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. They come in two different orders, perhaps because they go hand in hand. Learning and purification, they go hand in hand. So this, again, this is important to understand that there is an effect for sure for one's predisposition and nature. However, there's definitely an ability, and everyone has the ability to make amends and implement certain things that change. For someone to say, I can't do this, for instance, this is beyond me, this is not something I can do. Especially when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trials us with those things, and sometimes some of us might get to a point where we say, this is too much for me, for example, this is beyond me or something. This is a wrong notion, and especially for a traveler, for one who wants to purify and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it definitely is the wrong mentality, because if it was not possible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not trial us with it. And if it was not possible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not send his messenger and Ahlul Bayt, Quran, messengers, successors, Ahlul Bayt, all of this, so that they can teach us how to get through those trials, how to be victorious despite those trials or some difficulties. And one point in this section, he very, very important, he emphasizes on this point the fact that we have to always acknowledge and realize that we cannot travel to God without his help, without his assistance, without him giving us, that he calls it inaya. Inaya is a special care. Without his special care and consideration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how does it work? Does purification work from us, or does it work from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's obviously with his permission. However, he wants us to do something. But you take a small step and the rest of it, he will take care of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the rest of it easy. The initial steps are difficult. I'm not sure if you're familiar with gas consumption and cars. What the reasons cars in cities, most of you are aware, when you buy a car, they say fuel consumption, they give you city and they give you highway. Why? Because when it's in the city, there are a lot of taking off. Every time you take off from zero and you start accelerating, the car starts consuming a lot of gas. You know, it could go up to 50, 60, or sorry, 5 or 6 versus 50, 60 when you're going very fast, miles per gallon. So when you're taking off from 0, you end up with, if you monitor your car, you see, for instance, it's on 5 miles per gallon, or you know, even less, depends on the size of the car, how fast you take off. Whereas when you're on a highway and you're going smoothly, then you might be getting 30, 40, 50, depends on the car and the speed that you're going. You will end up consuming a lot less energy. Similarly, in the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in both worlds. In the physical world, he says that's how he made this world. He made the world having paths that are easy. And these are ayat in the Holy Quran. Imagine the whole thing was mountains. Then that would not be the case. We would never have the low consumption. We'll continuously be on high consumption. So he made it easy. You take off a little bit and, you know, okay, there's a hill, you take off and then you'll have it easy afterwards. Similarly, in the spiritual journey, obviously, asbab are all prepared by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the means are prepared by Him. Initial start is from us, and challenges are based on our capabilities. Some of us are challenged more, and that's because we're more capable. We can get further. And some of the challenges have to do with also our mizaj, or our predisposition, our environment. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts different people in different environments. That is part of the challenges. However, as we try and go through those challenges and fight our nafs, it is His help, His assistance, and His special kindness and hinayah that gets us through quicker eventually. The important point as he ends this section is that despite how challenging it is, yes, for some people it's very challenging because of because of their nature, because of their predisposition, it might be very challenging. However, if we knew how much happiness we're able to achieve, or you know, the level of pleasure and happiness that we're able to achieve through purification and through getting to those higher levels in the spiritual journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he calls the real felicity or happiness as surur al-haqiqi. If we knew how much pleasure and happiness there is, which is beyond what anyone has ever heard, any eyes eye has ever seen, or any mind has ever imagined, ولا خطر على قلب بشر, then we would it would make every effort well worth it. And then he quotes the ayah from the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Sajda, فلا تعلم نفس ما أخفي لهم من قرة أعين. People do not know what is hidden for them in terms of the things that bring pleasure to the eyes. You know, قرة أعين, what you know, what's cool and what's cooling, or what is beautiful to the eyes. The next section, any comments, any reflections from any mu'minin or mu'minat? Perhaps so I'm not the only one doing the talking. The next section, if anyone wants to share anything, please feel free, and don't forget to unmute yourself when you are sharing anything, so that we know that you are, if you are. The next section is on the effect of training and disciplining of the soul, the nafs, on one's akhlaq, on one's ethics. So this is a very important section that introduces some of the terminologies that we will be continuously referring to and speaking of. One is about khuluq. The term akhlaq comes from khuluq, which is the plural of khuluq. And although we translate it as khuluq, as ethics, it's a limited translation. Sometimes I use both in combination, ethics and morals. However, even both could be limited, especially because the term has the root of the term has two sides to it, and they're somehow related, and the meaning could be related to both. In fact, many of you may have heard the way people pronounce my family name, which is for those who know Khaliq or Al Khaliq. Some people, they say Al Khaliq, and obviously that is an incorrect pronunciation. Why? Because one speaks about the creator, Al-Khaliq, and one is the Khaliq, being the one with good akhlaq or good morals, or highly ethical, like Fa'il, like Kareem, for example. In any case, the reason why I brought this up is because both Khaliq and Khaliq are from the same root. This is perhaps why the confusion comes from, especially in the English writing. But Khalq and Khuluq are from the three-letter root, which is very, very related. How you the accents do make a difference. However, they were related, hence usage of the same letters. So same letters with different accents or different the i'rab. Khalq or khalaqa. Khalq is creation. Khalaqa, he created. Khuluq is the nature that one is in, that the type of person that one is, or their ethical or moral being. And khaluqa versus khalaqa. We said khalaqa means what? Created. Khaluqa, he became of good akhlaq, or he became of a certain nature, certain type. So we have, for instance, تخلقوا بأخلاق الله. Try and gain the types of qualities like the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is Kareem, He is Rahim, He is Ghafoor. He is all these beautiful akhlaq or traits, and we should try and be like Him. Again, when it comes to the term, it is related in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, khalaqa, and there's in that forming of us, there is some level of a form that has to do with our traits. This is why there are three opinions actually when it comes to akhlaq and whether or not they can be changed. So this is the whole discussion here is over the effect of training on one's akhlaq. If that's our nature, the form that we're created in, then can it be really changed? That is the question. And inshallah, we'll go through the three schools and their opinion on this. However, before we get to that, first, al-khuluq, he says, it is the malaka. Malaka, some in the translation, I believe they use the term faculty. Maybe that's a good translation, but I want to explain what malaka is, and then perhaps if we use faculty, then we know what we're referring to. It's not just about usage of the term, but also to understand what we are really referring to. So we have the term malaka, which they translated as faculty. A malaka is, again, in Arabic, there is a relationship between the term and its root. It comes from the ownership, okay? It is a trait, a quality that the soul owns it. It has it. It possesses it, okay? It, for example, if we say somebody, karam is their malaka. Generosity is their something they own. It's a trait that they have. It's imprinted on their soul. This is who he is. Okay, so this is malaka. He says khuluq is the malaka, the faculty of the soul, of the nafs, and it is the reason why we do things. So if somebody acts generously, it's because, generally speaking, unless there's fake generosity, sometimes showing off, the riya and so on. But generally speaking, if somebody acts generously, it's because they have, their nafs is karima. Okay, their nafs has this faculty or this malaka of, they possess karam, generosity, with as part of their nature. Okay, so khuluq is their or their one's akhlaq, their khuluq being the plural of which is akhlaq, is that the collection of the faculty or malaka, possessions of natural possessions that would lead to them acting in ways naturally, without any takalluf, without any difficulty. So he doesn't have to push himself to be generous. He doesn't have to push himself to be kind, for example. That's their nature. He or she, that's them. On the other hand, some people, in order to act generously, they have to push themselves. So now the first one we said is al-khuluq. The second term, malaka, he says, what is malaka? What is this if we translate it to faculty? Although I think the translation to faculty may be insufficient, may be poor. So I may end up using the term malaka if everyone is okay with it. And obviously I'll have to explain it here and there to remind us of what we're speaking of. Would that be okay if I use malaka?
I think it should be fine.
Inshallah. So I might stick to malaka. What again, if please, if I say something and anyone is unclear on what it is, please do ask, so that we are all on in the same boat, understand what's going on. I don't want anyone to be left behind, inshallah. So again, malaka, he says, what is malaka? Malaka, he says, is the type of nafs, the imprint of the nafs, that it changes very slowly. Very important here. He says it's not like a condition, hal. He says there's hal, or a condition, a state. A state could change. Okay, sometimes with a very motivational speech, one feels generous. Okay, that feeling, that state of generosity, or that feeling of generosity, or that condition that they have that at that moment is not long lived. typically it's short-lived. He says Malaka is different. Malaka is very slow to change. Conditions and states or emotions could change much quicker, but which he calls al-hal. But Malaka is very slow to change. This is very important to understand. The fact that it's slow to change is a very important aspect about it, because in people, when they start on a journey of purification, start trying to purify and better themselves, many people think that it's going to happen overnight. It's going to happen quick. I was having a conversation, in fact, last night with one of the mu'mineen about family issues and so on. And what I shared with them is this very point, that when it comes to we have the body, we have the mind, and we have the soul. If a combination of all of them could be how we feel and how we act and how we behave and so on. When it comes to the body, and every one of them has an effect on the other. When it comes to the body, we think that the most difficult thing to change and to implement any kind of change with is the body. And we think the easiest one is the soul. And I'll explain what I mean. So we think, okay, if I want to lose some weight and be very athletic, and let's say I'm obese, overweight, that's gonna take 6 months to a year before I can get there with a lot of hard work. Yes. Then when it comes to the mind, we think, okay, that's much easier. I can read a few things, understand a few things, and change my mentality. Okay, and the way I think and the way I understand things and so on. And spirituality, I don't even need to read a few things. I just say Bismillah and it's done. That's typically how people behave, and how our attitude towards these changes are physical, mental, and spiritual. But in actual fact, they are quite the opposite. They're completely, we have it completely in the other way around. The body is the easiest one to manipulate and change. The second one, the mind, is the more difficult one. And the most difficult one is spirituality. When it comes to the akhlaq, which is the collection of malakat, those malakat are the plural of malaka. So akhlaq is the plural of khuluq, malakat plural of malaka. So if it's faculties or whatever you want to translate it, but we'll stick to malaka as possessions of the nafs in terms of traits and qualities. Okay, the akhlaq collection of the malakat. Okay, akhlaq are the most difficult to change, and those malakat that we have, if it's not within us, if it's not part of us, changing is the most difficult. The mind is the second level, and the body is the easiest. If the body is the easiest, and if it takes 6 months to a year to change in the physical world, in terms of our physical appearance, and going through a detox or detoxification, and then I don't know, training and exercise and special diet, and all of a sudden now I have a new body type and much healthier. If that's what it takes for the body, imagine what it would take for the mind. If one who is sick, I gave an example. If I'm sick physically, I have some bacteria, okay? And I go to the doctor, and the doctor says to me, you need to take some antibiotics, okay? You need to take a course of 2-week course of antibiotics, for example. He gives me the prescription and I go. If I don't even acquire the prescription or consume the prescription, do I get anywhere? I'm not gonna get anywhere. Just the fact that he diagnosed me and gave me the prescription isn't gonna heal me. I have to go through those 2 weeks of course of antibiotics, for example. When it comes to the mental change and mentality or mental improvement in terms of our thinking, if somebody has any kind of disorders, for example, phobias or disorders, that's even more difficult. If I go to a therapist, a counselor or a therapist, and I have a discussion, a conversation, and say by second or third session, they have finally diagnosed my issue and they give me some sort of a treatment. If I don't do anything, let's say their treatment is for me to reflect on, to implement positive thinking, okay? To reflect on the positive things in life, to start my day with gratitude, think of 3 things or 5 things that I'm grateful for that I have today, okay? Let's say that's their implementation. And I go home, or that's their recommendation. I go home and I implement nothing. I do nothing different. I just go back to my normal life or the way I was before. I'm not going to change. Nothing's going to happen. Just like the guy who didn't take the course of antibiotics, just walked home with a prescription. The next thing is this, the spiritual purification and the improvement in our journey of akhlaq. It is the most difficult one out of them. However, just a good news here, with the inaya, this is important. With the special kindness and care from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this equation could change. Yes, 100-year journey could turn into a night. This is often what they say in the Gnostics, in their poetry. They say, a journey of 100 years in one night. It could happen with, again, the inaya and special care and kindness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously because of the special request, a pure heart that is sincerely requesting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, again, the malakat are slow to change. He says they are very slow to be removed. If somebody is generous, they're generous, and very, very difficult to make them not generous, or vice versa. And versus the hal, or the condition, the state that could change quicker. And then he says, akhlaq, the reason why we have certain khuluq, let's say generosity is the khuluq that we're discussing, that type of akhlaq, that malaka is present in the individual. It could be because of a few things. One is the mizaj. We said that earlier. Mizaj being the type of person that they are, the nature. Okay, so it could be part of their nature. Another one could be a habit. We are recommended to teach our children to give charity on a daily basis so that they can develop generosity. Okay, so that habit of giving. Okay, so it develops. It could be natural. It could be habitual through doing things and becomes a habit, or it could be a product of what he calls takalluf, a product of training. Product of training with a lot of patience and persistence until it becomes part of our second nature, hatta yasira malaka, until it becomes really part of our nature, or a second nature within us. So those akhlaq could be any of those. Now, this is not, we're not getting into any of those levels and how we can implement certain things. He's just introducing khuluq and the malaka and how each of them behave and how they're acquired. So we said khuluq is that nature, that type of person that we are, and malakat are the kind of qualities that we possess, the nafs possesses. Some may translate it as faculty, for instance, in the translation. And the way they come is either nature or the habits, or through a lot of training and exercise, spiritual exercise. Now, he says that ulama al-akhlaq, they are three groups when it comes to whether or not akhlaq can be changed, whether or not malakat can be added or removed. Okay? If one has a malaka, can they remove it? Can they reduce it or remove it completely? If one does not have a malaka, can they try and acquire it and become possessing of it, or not? That question. With regards to that question, he says there are three schools of thought. One that suggests that no, there is nothing, it's not possible to change any of those things. And they have some ahadith that they quote to suggest that it's not possible to change those things. For example, there is a hadith that says, "An-nasu ma'adin." People are different type of resources. Ma'dan are the natural resources, the things that you would get from from mines. Okay, so sometimes you're mining for gold, sometimes you're mining for silver, sometimes you're mining for coal. They often use those three examples. One is the most precious, one is the medium, silver, and coal being the cheapest. And actually, it's dark and dirty. If you work in it, you're going to be, they use this is more of a parable, that you will be, you're black-faced or, dark-faced, use when you're mining for that kind of resource. So the hadith says people are of those resources. Some of them are like gold, and some of them are like silver. And the best ones amongst the people who were good in Jahiliyyah are good in Islam. There's a hadith that some people were generous in Jahiliyyah, and in Islam they are generous. Some people were brave in Jahiliyyah, in Islam they're brave, and vice versa. Some people are cowardish, for example, or cowardly. Some people are stingy, or they have a lot of misery as part of their nature. Okay, they were, and they continued. So this is a hadith that is narrated from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This group of people, they use this hadith to say that we cannot change. Really, we cannot. It is whatever we are. This idea or this ideology is definitely far from truth and reality. And the reason we say that is because we have evidence in the Holy Quran and in the Hadith against this idea. And this Hadith is misunderstood, therefore. That there's this Hadith and there's another Hadith, for instance. It says, if you hear of a mountain moving, you can believe that. But if you hear of an individual changing in their khuluq, then you should not believe that, because he will always go back to his nature. ما جُبِلَ عليه, whatever his clay was molded with. So generosity or none, bravery or none, whichever it is. Again, this is also a hadith, but we have to understand the hadith in light of other ahadith and ayat of the Holy Quran. Again, if this hadith was the only hadith and there's nothing else, if this is the hadith that we should, I don't know if there was a comment that I missed.
Yeah, I think someone is giving other words in place of the word faculty.
Uh-huh.
So
Malaka?
Fadila is virtue, Safa trait, Malaka disposition, Qudra capacity, Istita'a or Qudra for capacity.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe disposition instead of faculty, a disposition. I think in the book they used the term disposition for something else, but in the translation, again, it's some of the translations are not free of error. So, or it could be just their perspective, but maybe disposition is a better term for malaka, perhaps. But again, with the ahadith that we have that suggest, for instance, that this is the nature, you cannot change it. It goes against the clear Quranic evidence. Okay, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, "قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا." If tazkiyah is not possible, tazkiyah is change. Okay, if tazkiyah is not possible, then why would the Quran say it? Why would the ahadith say it? It's not that would go against. There is, yes, there is something in the hadith that would actually be important to understand, and in basically putting the two together, perhaps what the hadith is saying is that if someone's nature is that, let's say, greed, okay, if that's their nature, okay, they obviously have to fight against it. If they don't keep fighting against it and allow the circumstances around them, the environment around them to overtake, then they would go back to their original traits of greed and so on. But if they constantly and continuously are purifying and fighting against their nafs and so on, then they can ascend for sure. They can change. Also, sometimes some of those ahadith are speaking of general conditions versus certain things that are unique or rare. So it is rare for sure for people. It is less frequent or less common for somebody who is by nature coward or cowardly to become brave. Okay, it's less common. It is, they have to fight it. There's a lot of jihad there, a lot of struggling there. Whereas somebody who is by nature brave, it's easier for them.
Question, Sheikh, on that. So sometimes, you can, of course, everyone has a struggle and a path that they're going to go through to be able to achieve these different traits. But what about those who, like the comment earlier that one of the participants has shared, for example, when there is the emphasis placed on when, the mother is nurturing the unborn child. So even from when they are conceived, to try and consume halal or, remain in worship and things like that. Or we've heard of I don't know which scholar, I think the mother would always be in a state of tahara or wudu or something before feeding the child, right?
Allah Ansari, yes.
Yeah. Or if we look at the Ahlul Bayt, right, where they would they have all these amazing unique traits that we are aspiring to try and get even a fraction of some of those. So
Yeah,
is it an unfair advantage in some situation for the child? I mean, of course, the child has done nothing wrong.
of course.
The mother or the parents were not mindful of things before.
Yeah,
Does that mean that child is now born at a disadvantage compared to like
disadvantage.
a child who born in the family of Ahlul Bayt, for example?
Ahsan, ahsan. So the answer to that is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are two sides to the answer. One is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants parents based on what they deserve. And so the child, from the pre-knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of what the child would end up in this family. Okay, regardless. So that's the best situation, and those are the best circumstances for the child to start with. Secondly, God knows of their struggle, and whatever comes easy, the reward of it is not going to be as much as the one that comes difficult. Okay, so for instance, somebody who is predisposed to greed, okay, and grows up in a very greedy environment, okay, parents, culture, everything around them, okay, yet they end up fighting and being generous here and there, okay. Their generosity outweighs the generosity of someone who was predisposed to generosity and was in a generous environment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly their trial, their struggle, and what they achieved. So he's not going, it's like a millionaire versus a poor person giving $5. Okay, a poor guy gives $5 and a millionaire gives, or a millionaire, they pass the donation box. We're building a masjid, and the millionaire gives $500, and this poor guy who just got his first paycheck, he gives half his paycheck, $500. Okay, who can barely make ends meet. Are they the same? Obviously, they're not the same. So Allah, who knows of their struggle and what they're doing, or the level of generosity that they're exercising despite their circumstances and so on. So again, that disadvantage may work to their advantage with a simple struggle that they end up doing something against their nature, versus one who is even not just doing it once, training again and again to the point that that becomes their second nature. Okay. So if we compare the two, it is definitely way more valuable and way more rewarding, and that's the only one who knows is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
Yes, I think it helps, but it is also, you also don't want to put, if you as a parent, or even, if you have to migrate, sometimes you want to always set up yourself and your family for success, right? So I think that on the one hand, there's a struggle, but you also want to create the best opportunities, just like, people choose the best schools for their children, they choose the best this and that. So we should always,
Of course, but yes, there is that. It basically, it's up to the parents how much they want to help their child, so that
right,
they give them a good head start.
right,
You could give your child a very good head start, and your child ends up becoming, by the time they're born, they're so ready for all these beautiful qualities, and then they build on them and they go much further, versus somebody who they don't, uh, they the parents, the family do not do much. They are seeking dunya, and dunya, we think, yes, there's a big disadvantage for the child. However, can he complain that because of how disadvantaged I am, I can't do anything, or I can't achieve anything? No, they can achieve, and they can use that to their advantage in order to go much further or much higher. Now, again, we have to keep the first part of the answer in mind, which is God's knowledge of what they would be, and therefore putting them in that environment. Because obviously, for somebody to become an imam, they have to be durriyatan ba'duha min ba'd. That from that lineage. Okay, so now God put them in that lineage, but doesn't mean that everyone in that lineage with no exception, and they have to do nothing from themselves. There's no decision for them to make, and so on. That is not correct either, because we have children of imams who went against the even children of prophets who went against the prophet of their time or the imam of their time, and became amongst the kafirin. The very famous story is the story of the son of Nuh. Yeah, so he was in the best environment, in the best possible. I mean, he had all the positive factors in terms of the father, the teachings, the halal food, and all of that stuff, you know.
Right.
But they did not. He himself did not use it to his advantage, and he lost. Yet some who use even the very difficult circumstances that they were in to their advantage, they become winners. And we have examples of people who changed and switched from one camp to another despite all of their surrounding circumstances and so on.
Thank you.
No problem. So that's one school. The other school is the school that suggests that, yes, it's all possible to change. The Allama, he says that this is also not completely accurate, because there are certain things that are not possible to change. So yes, one is capable of changing, and most things can change, but not everything is possible to change. Some things are not possible to change, and he gives examples of some of the mental capacities, or mental capabilities rather. For instance, one who is smart, okay, they're high IQ, you can only train it so much, you know. Or one who is on very low IQ, you can only change it so much. And so obviously those things would affect their acquiring of knowledge, and therefore certain changes. So he says, yes, malakat can be changed and can be removed or added, but not all of them. And so he considers the middle path to be correct. So neither the one who says no change is possible, nor the one who says every change is possible, rather somewhere in between. And so he says, this is an amazing reflection that he has. He says, even animals can train. So in terms of to confirm that change is possible, even animals can be trained and change. Okay, and so change is possible for sure. And in terms of the fact that no, it's not 100% in the sense that everything. He says the fact that no matter how much people train on, you know, similar camp, you put people in an indoor school, or whatever they call them, the boarding school, I think they call them, and you put people in a boarding school, and you have same teachers, same training, everything the same, you will never ever find two people to be exactly the same. In every trade, every khuluq, and so on. And that is because of the fact that not everything is possible to completely change to a level, to a degree. And he quotes a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, this is a very beautiful hadith because it's almost like a balance. He says, "اعملوا فكل ميسر لما خلق له." اعملوا meaning work. You need to strive, work hard. Okay? And then he says, everyone will be led to what they are created individually, they're created for. You know, so there's a level of purification, a level of success, achievement that it's made for them. Each of them has that level possible for them, and they have to work for it. So he uses the term the seed. He says it's like a seed. Let's say you have a seed of the pit of a date. Okay, so you have the pit of a date that is that you planted. If the environment, the right environment is not there, it's not going to. If there's no struggling, if you don't work on it, put it in the right environment, the right soil, watering, sun, and so on, it's never going to become a palm tree. Okay, it takes maybe 10 to 12, 15 years for that to start giving palms. Dates. Become a palm tree and start giving dates, for instance. So matures and gives dates and so on. So all this hard work has to be there for it to get there. However, potentially it had it. So every one of us has a potential. And this is, subhanAllah, this discussion is very similar to what we hear from motivational speakers nowadays. That you need to try and strive to reach your potential. So every one of us has a potential, and we need to strive and work hard to achieve our potential, to be at the best that we could be, the best version of ourselves. And he says the goal is not to remove certain things when it comes to the main motives. We have what we call the shahwa and ghadab, the anger and desire. He says the goal is not to remove them, rather to make the balance. Okay, so one has a desire for food and so on. That's good, but it should not become at a level of shara, like wanting to consume so much that nothing is enough. And on the other hand, one should not remove it to a level where one's survival becomes an issue. So it's always about wasatiyya, to keep that middle path, keep the balance. There's one point that he shares in this section. Again, the section about the effect of tarbiyah, the effect of training on our akhlaq, on our ethics. One of the very important points to keep in mind is that we can never ever remove something that is existing completely to make it non-existing, and we can never make something exist that it never existed. So it's training. So the potential is there. In other words, in every one of us, some level of generosity is there, and we're training it, making it grow bigger. Some level of perhaps greed is there, and this is why Quran says, وَمَن يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ, whoever is protected from the greed of himself, okay, his own self. So every individual has a level of greed, has to protect themselves from it, and try and contain it completely, contain that, versus the generosity that one should try and nurture and make it grow bigger. So it is existing. They are existing. They are there potentially, and we're training them, and eventually making them stronger. The good traits to be stronger, and the bad ones to weaken them and make them contain them in a way that that are used in or desire, or the motives behind the bad traits, to contain them in a way that they're only used when we need them for good causes. The last point in this section, he says the first and the most significant teacher is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are speaking training. Training requires a teacher. And so if the first teacher and the main teacher here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the teachers that are divine teachers. So those who are the prophets and Ahlul Bayt who are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachers of akhlaq, our scholars of akhlaq, who are sharing the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt as the ones who are filled with wisdom and reminders that would help us in the journey of purification. Again, training is possible with the teachings being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first teacher, and Ahlul Bayt as the means to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before we move on to the next section, any questions, any comments on?
So I think also, Sheikh, given the time, I don't know if we wanna maybe have just another 3 or 4 more because it's almost 7:45 and
Okay. Okay, I'll just, in that case, if there are no comments, I'll just share the next part is pretty brief. I will share that and inshallah we'll conclude. Any comments before we move on?
and then you can just remind that we will have a break for the next 2 weeks from Haram and then resume after that, inshallah.
Inshallah, Santum. Yes, so as Ali Rada mentioned, inshallah we'll have the next 2 weeks we'll have a break and then we'll resume afterwards, inshallah. The last section, he calls it sharaf, the honor or the value of this science or this particular study, as opposed to any other science or any other study. He says شرف علم الأخلاق, referring to the science of ethics, لشرف موضوعه وغايته, because of the subject and the goal, the mission. So why do we study the akhlaq, and what are akhlaq versus any other science? If we study medicine, the goal is to improve the body, which is what? Which is perishing, no matter what we do. Yeah, it's important to do it, improve our body, to maintain our health, to be well. It's important, but no matter what we do, it's still perishing. And it's sooner or later, it comes to its end. Whereas when we study ilm al-akhlaq and try and reach our perfection in akhlaq, not a perfect body, not a perfect hair, not a perfect, I don't know, skin condition and so on, the perfect heart, the perfect soul. When we are trying to reach perfection in that level, that is what is lasting. He says, he quotes a poem in Farsi. He says, when you are studying or you're criticizing the soul to figure the real gem, then you will realize that it is higher than the heavens, greater than the heavens, and yet when it's less than soil. It's less than soil as in the body. The body is less lasting than soil. We come from it and we return to it. Do we not? So which one, in terms of lasting and existence, which one is more significant? The body or the soil that the body was made of? We are less significant in the physical existence in terms of lasting and in terms of strength and power. We're less significant than the soil. Yet we can be greater than the heavens as when we purify in terms of spiritual purification. And then he quotes the hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, "Inni wuzintu bi ummati farajahtu bihim." I was put on a scale to be weighed against my entire ummah, and I outscaled them or outweighed them. So the Prophet and his value is greater than his entire ummah. Wuzintu bi ummati farajahtu bihim. And again, because the qadar is not based, or the value is not based on the physical value, because physical value, our body versus soil is stronger, soil lasts longer. But in terms of our spiritual existence, therefore, it is obvious that this is the most significant subject to study, and qualities to acquire, skills and qualities to acquire. And any student, he says, and this is an important point, inshallah, we'll finish with this one. Any student that is studying any subject, whether it be science and technology or specifically Islamic studies, any subject that is studied for the sake of God, again, if we're studying for goodness, for the sake of God, then the number one thing that we need to focus on is study and improve in our akhlaq, in our purification. That is the most significant part. And he considers that to be the door. He says, وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا. Quran says, enter houses from the doors. So the house of knowledge, the door of it is purification. Seeking knowledge first through purification and improvement in our ethics, in our akhlaq, inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد.
على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت.
Santum Jami'an. Thank you. And please keep us in your prayers in these nights, especially as you are either in buka or tabaki or ibka, whether you're crying or making others cry, or you're trying to cry. Whichever one you are participating in, please remember us, inshallah, in your dua.
Inshallah.
Ya man Allah.